invitation, not an obligation. So you won't offend me if you need to go, but go ahead.
So I already said that Dad loved to sing with the Kansas Mennonite men's chorus, and I thought, wouldn't it be fun to just sing a men's song and have a group and sing a song that the men's chorus sang? And so we're going to sing Come, Come, Ye Saints. It is just quintessential men's chorus, arranged by J. Harold Moyer. You know, he sang in the choir for many years, arranged a lot of their songs. Anyway, so Shalom is going to join me up here, wherever you are, and let's sing a song.
You want to turn it?
It's this way.
Yeah, I think so.
That's it? Okay.
Yeah. And you remember the ending? Yeah.
Yeah, the ending is. I said, all is well, all is well. I got it written in mine.
Yeah.
You sing the upper melody at the end. Yes, got it.
Oh, who's got the mic? Somebody? Just, yeah, let's just turn it off. I just don't want it to be too loud if we're hollering into it.
Because we're going to be all right.
Come, come, ye saints, no toil or labor fear, but with joy wend your way. Though harsh to you the journey may appear, great shall be as your day. We have a living Lord to guide, and we can trust Him to provide. Do this and joy, your hearts will swell. All is well, all is well. The world of care is with us every day. Let it not this obscure. Here we can serve the Master on the way, and in Him be secure. Gird up your loins, fresh courage, faith, our God never us forsake, and so our song no fear can quell. All is well, all is well. We'll find the rest which God for us prepared, when at last He will call, where none will come to hurt or make afraid. He will reign over all. We will make the air with music, praise to God, our Lord and King. Oh, how we'll make for us swell. All is well, all is well.
And I think Paul, my brother Perry, would say, praise the Lord. So this is an opportunity for some of you to share that have not shared earlier. Of course, there will be, you'll have very personal kinds of things that you might not want to share with the whole group, but this is a chance to tell a story perhaps of how Perry's life touched yours. We heard different people say how he took gifts to people or remembered people or called people. And perhaps this is an opportunity for you to say, you know, this was a special time when something happened that I'll always remember Perry for. And we have a roving mic to assist in that. I'll, of course, have a couple of stories myself along the way. But let's start with anyone. Just raise your hand, and we'll take some time to get the roving mic to you for sharing a story. We'll begin over here. And if you'd kindly identify yourself, and if you wouldn't mind standing up and using your sort of a kind of outside voice so that we can all hear in this space.
Okay, I'll do my best. I'm Nathan Yoder, Judith's cousin, and mentioned already this morning the different times that Perry would call. The one thing they didn't mention was how he kept track when people went on trips. And inevitably, if our family went on a trip, he would call us when we were on the way. He'd say, "Where are you at? What mile marker are you?" So we're on the way to South Dakota. We say we're in Nebraska on Highway 81 at mile marker, 126. I know exactly where you're at.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for mentioning your connection to the family. That's a useful thing, too.
I'm Lois Yoder, cousin to Perry. And I think he would have found it very interesting that he died 3 years on the day after his Aunt Barbara, my mother.
Yes. Yes, and Vernon, may I call on you, Vernon Wiki, where are you here somewhere? Can you give the number thing? He was sitting beside me at the meal, and he said, "This is quintessential Perry." So if you'll share it, I think that'll be great. Follows up with Lois's comment.
Yeah, actually, somebody pointed this out to me, and I said, "Yeah, this is a Perry thing," and I think it's the providence of God. The date today is 12/31/23. 123 123.
And there you have it. That's one of the reasons Perry could remember things, because he used a system for numbers and other things that made sense.
I was working on a construction project up on a roof about 60 miles from here, maybe, and the phone rang, and it was Perry. And Perry was asking, "How is your day going? How are things going? Do you know that Janet Nyze was born on this day?" And he was asking me how my day was going, and I don't remember how quickly I interrupted, because I had just gotten word that my father had been killed, and so it was kind of took a different turn in the conversation. But I remember very well that day and that call with the turn of events.
Thank you. Well, about Perry, I'm David Yoder. And a long time. We were traveling over Minnesota one day. I got a call from Perry. He said, "What mile mark are you at?" And I told him. He said, "Well, I'm at this part." And so, believe it or not, about 10 miles later, we met there on the highway. Just stopped and had a little chat. He went his way and I went mine. Thank you, Dave.
Well, the mile marker thing comes up again. Go ahead, Joe. Tell your name. And pardon me. Yes, I'm Joe Yoder, brother to this guy that just spoke. Twyla and I were traveling back from Colorado once, and I was putting together a little event, which I do periodically, that includes several couples, and Twyla would not know who was coming. And that year we were having Perry and Judith in the group, and so Perry asked me what she was hearing the conversation and just wondering who this person is, and as we made our plans, and then he asked me, "What mile marker are you at?" And I said, and he said, "Well, you're so far from Pleasant View." And I repeated that, and she said, Perry and Judith coming. Perry had an astounding memory. I worked with him at Pleasant View Home Improvement when I was in my late teens. And we would have our discussions, and I remembered certain things, and we would talk about it, and he remembered something differently. And we began to bet milkshakes. I gave up very quickly because I lost every time.
Which says something about how much Perry likes milkshakes as well.
Well, I'm Gary Miller, and one day, maybe 20 years ago, maybe 25, I don't remember.
Perry would remember that, of course.
Well, that's true.
Go ahead.
And it would have been, I think, after they had worked at Choice Books because of the rest of the story. He told me, he asked me, "Well, have you ever read this certain book?" And I said, "No. I don't think I've." "Well, let me go get it for you." And he hustled over to the Choice storeroom, and he bought that book and brought it over and gave it to me. And you know where that book resides today? On my nightstand. I love to pick it up once in a while, and it's entitled "How to Be Rich Without Any Money."
Wonderful. Let me throw in one little... Okay. I want to follow up on one thing that was said during the service today about Perry inviting Judas to make calls sometimes when he wasn't able to make the calls. Well, not only that, sometimes when he was in a conversation with someone that I knew, say from my youth days, he'd be in conversation with them in the room, and he'd call me up and say, "Here they are," and he'd hand the phone to them, and we'd have a conversation because he thought I would enjoy that, and most times that was true.
Okay, I'm Melvin Harold Nisley, and my wife Clara May, and David E. and Barbara Ellen and Perry and Judith had many good times together. We would regularly go out to eat together, and the ladies would get together. And all those things that Lyle said, I could just hear Perry say them or do them. And the Don Loney recordings, and he'd remember birthdays. But then he did, like he'd call me and say, "Nancy Yatsik cut the salmon Daling Glenabu cotton hen and Melvin case." 90 years ago, when his dad-in-law had his birthday, Melvin and Sam and Daly had a little boy named Melvin, and that was just typical of what he did.
I'm Joseph Hirschberger, and Perry and I connected over farming stuff. So in his younger days, he helped his uncle Raymond, was it his uncle, farm, and we live on the sandiest 80 in Reno County. And so that's often how he started our conversation was, "Well, how's the sandiest 80 in Reno County?"
I'm David Miller, and I guess I grew up with Perry and worked with Perry, probably interacted with him more than most of you did. We had a lot of good
David, you want to hold the mic just a little closer to your...
Okay.
Now, there you go.
We had a lot of good experiences. The first I knew Perry is when we entered Elmhurst in the first grade. And we're in school several years till he went to Iowa. And he came back, and we were together as in the youth group. And then after we both were married, we interacted more. But for my tenure at PHI was around 50 years. Perry started before I did. He came and went several times. But we had a lot of good discussions, some deep, some not so deep, some frivolous, and some arguments, but we always ended up friends. At one point, when we were working there, we kind of had a personal crusade to keep Partridge Cafe going. And we would... Every Friday morning, before we went to work, we would go to the cafe and eat breakfast. And it didn't hurt that the meals were dirt cheap and that the food was at least edible. But the fun started when we got back to work and Perry started to imitate Ruth Jones.
I'd like to say a word about Perry's imitation. As long as I can remember, Perry was able to imitate people. We met together, the family's meeting downstairs this morning, and we talked about that a little bit. And someone made the comment, which I definitely agree is true, that Perry had a keen ability for observation. That's why he could imitate. And I'll say something further. I don't know how you experienced it, but I experienced it as having fun. That when he imitated people, it wasn't to make fun of them. It was to have fun with them or with us. So a way of just being together and enjoying our idiosyncrasies. That's how I think of Perry in the imitation phase. And I don't know how John Deere tractors would feel, but I think he did them right. Yes, Leroy.
Yeah, I
Oh,
got
I'm
Mike
sorry.
here.
Someone else have it over here?
Yeah, I got Mike.
Oh,
Hiromi
you wanna
Iwasuge,
stand
my
up
name.
first? There you go.
Well, he's one of those my earlier acquaintance, and I came here state 71,
Yes.
and I get to know Perry and his uncle Perry, old
Yes.
man Perry, and Glenn and Benji, and well, the place I worked in Hutchinson 72, and there was a big restaurant. It's called the George's Restaurant. And when break time comes, all of them they come to, take a break. And I was about same time too. And I just observed how happy they were in their conversation, So that's the first I get to know them. And so, but, getting thinned down now.
Thank you very much. I think Leroy was ready to share something over here.
We had someone back here too.
Oh,
Maybe I'll catch over here.
okay. Your choice there.
I'm Lois Mast, and I just remember in recent years several times Perry calling when he was already at the manor and just visiting, wondering how your day's going, and he remembers our wedding. We said, "Marvelous are God's ways." He remembered that above the table. And one more little detail that he told me about was when he was working for Dad, I was a toddler, and he would take me in the farm truck, and I'd stand on the seat beside him. He'd have to put his arm out to keep me from falling off the seat. That was just a neat memory to picture something that I, of course, don't remember.
Yes. Interesting. Okay.
I'm Leroy Hirschberger, and I was Perry Lee's mechanic, and so I'll speak for his tractors. Perry Lee was the best client I could ask for. His tractors were like people to him, and he had no rest until they were properly cared for. And so in the last years, we have to change the oil in the Massey Ferguson, and when can you do that? And I'd come up there and I'd check the odometer, and he'd put 5 hours on it that year. But we had to change that oil so he could sleep at night. Judith told me, he said, "I'm so glad you come and take care of the tractors, because he has no rest until that's done." And the other thing that made him the best customer ever is he could not go to bed until he had paid his bills. And it was almost to a fault, but he really was concerned about getting everything taken care of every day. And I absolutely adored his way of imitating people. And again, there's so many ways that you can be vicious doing that. Perry was never vicious. He loved noticing those individual quirks in people and then playing them over again because it was so much fun. The story was great the first time, but the 50th time, he was like a little kid there just waiting, and then the punchline's coming. It was inspiring. We should all live like that.
It's a mark of frugality to be able to use something over and over. And if you can use the same joke 150 times and laugh 150 times, go for it. Over here, there's someone.
Where is it?
Oh, over here.
Okay, we just got fresh batteries in the mic, so we can go a while.
I think it's Rosa.
My mother was very elderly, and I'd push her wheelchair up to the front of here in church, and when we'd have a birthday, and Perry, in his faithfully remembering that, he would want to sing, and it always brought me, oh my, my mother would, at the end of the birthday song, she would start with, "May the good Lord bless you." and, oh, well, that was good, except it's not very good for one person, not a solo. So, the other morning when it was noon, we were at the table, and this call came that Perry died. His death has taught me a lot, because I was thinking of Perry and Judith. I really want to let them know, sent them a card, and I did not get it done. And I just want to be more mindful of people that, I mean, like Perry, that had so much time, and right now it seemed like I didn't. So yeah, Perry and Judith have been such good friends of ours, and we really appreciated them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Glenn Stutzman, I'm Perry's brother, and tell you a little experience about when we were living in Iowa. When we came back, I was 11 years old, but anyhow, Perry and I, of course, he was big brother, and we'd be all over that little town, going to the grocery store, and everywhere. One day we were walking about a block from the shop, and there was a guy, Dick White was his name, living in a brooder house close to the railroad track. Anyhow, he said, "Hey boys, would you like to make a little money?" And we said, "Yeah." So he says, "Come over here." He says, "I got this bucket. Just go down the alley, second house, knock on the door, and they'll fill it for you, and bring it back. That's my drinking water, and I'll pay you a dime." And so we did, and he says on Saturdays, come back on Saturdays, and I need 2 buckets so I can take a bath. Anyhow, so we did that, and so we had spending money, and just half a block east of Dad's shop, there was a Skelly oil station, and they had pop in glass bottles. There was orange and grape, that's all. And the small bottles were 3 cents, and the large bottles were 5 cents. And then they had a little canister of peanuts, shelled peanuts. And we'd say, well, we'd like to have 10 cents, 15 cents worth of peanuts. And we'd pay them. And then we put the peanuts in the bottle. That's how we ate them. Yeah, we had many good memories from Iowa. So, anyhow, that's about it.
And nobody so far has mentioned Perry's love for peanuts. Perry very much loved peanuts. In that, he was like his father. I think I told a story in Tobias of the Amish how Dad would take a package of peanuts and hang it on the paint dryer. You dry paint on spray painted things that would come out, a bake oven, really, a bake oven. So we'd go around, and by the time it came to the end, the peanuts were just roasted just right, along with the particular equipment being having baked paint just right.
We have.
Yes, maybe so.
I'm James Miller. We have special memories of Perry and Judith. It was the last, number of years. I'll let you figure out how many here pretty soon, but it was that Perry would call every year. He didn't this past year, was the first time that he didn't call. So my phone would ring, and I would answer it and say, "Hello." There'd be a pause. 7777. And then we would have some conversation after that. The other thing I thought of this morning, of course, when we talked about his tractors, I was privileged to paint both his Massey and his 3010 John Deere, which the 3010 John Deere was extremely special to him. Sorry, 4010. We have a 3010, so yeah, that was a 4010 John Deere. He bought it at Willie Wagler's sale, and I had worked for Willie Wagler for 5 years, so I worked a lot of field with that tractor. He bought it, took the cab off, and from there it just got nicer. I'm not sure. My brother Dave shared a little bit ago. He stopped short of what I thought he was going to say. I'll clue you in a little bit on what he should have said. And that is back in the day when he started dating Barbara. I think Perry Lee was the go-between man between him and Barbara. Would you accept a date from Dave, is what Perry had to say. I think that even held true for my brother Edward. That must have been a different era, or I had different blood because I didn't need that intervention. So, but after we got the tractor painted, the 4010 John Deere, that brought on a new era for us with Perry and Judith. We started going out every year. He said, we need to go out for pizza. So every year after that, we went out with Perry and Judith for pizza. And there were times when I couldn't remember who paid the last time. We would alternate. And all I had to do was ask Perry, it's your turn. Or it's my turn.
And you were the one that paid every time when you asked, right? Well, I'd like to say a further word about the 4010 John Deere, because my life intersects with that one. I was working for Willie Wagler the year he bought it. The year before that, now Perry was always big compared to me. Well, I'll say more about that later, but Perry was big, but I was slight enough that when we had to tighten the hand clutch adjustment on the G case, it was really hard to get it out sometimes or push it all the way in. I had to really jerk to get it there. Well, the next year he bought this 4010 John Deere. And so I broke it in for Willie, so to speak. And then Perry and we borrowed that tractor Perry and I plowed at night, like was mentioned yesterday, plowed at night to plow our the mom's 40. So I remember that night and how much I enjoyed being with Perry, plowing at night and coming home, and Mom had some cold milk soup for us. It must have been midnight.
I'm James Shetler, not Shelter, and one of the special gifts that Perry gave me that's still in my garage, I'm not using it, but it's apparently your father, one of the items that he manufactured at one time in his shop, I don't know, I assume it was in Iowa somewhere, was these little boxes that had your house number on it. They were, and had a light bulb on the inside.
Yes, yes.
Well, Perry went to the bother of making one that had my street address on it, 5600,
yes,
and gave it to me, and I still have it.
Well, I'd like to turn to a bit more of a serious note here. Yes, a note literally, and also just something I like to share. A note was given to me of an incident that happened where Perry, not long after my family moved from Iowa, came to a local family here, visited to make satisfaction, as the letter says, about money that his dad had borrowed. Now, if you've read my book, Tobias of the Amish, you know much of the background for this story, that my father was actually had filed for bankruptcy, or rather he had bankruptcy forced on him at the time, shortly, some months before he died, and it wasn't settled until long after his death. And so Perry felt the weight of this debt. And I don't know how many other people he may have gone to visit in a similar way as this person shared today, but this family thought highly of Perry for having done that, made that notion. Now, Perry carried the burden of never having an unpaid debt. Leroy, there you have it. That he didn't want to delay paying his bills because of that. And that's the way he handled his money, probably to sort of redeem that to some extent. And Perry, I think also, he probably didn't speak about it, but Perry also carried shame, the shame of a family that had died with debts. Because this is different in different communities, by the way. There are communities where bankruptcy is not a big deal. It's just kind of how you have a business. But there are communities, more like maybe our Mennonite and Amish communities, where having a debt is almost like marital unfaithfulness or adultery or some other kinds of moral sins. And so this was a very difficult thing for Perry, and of course for me too, but much later on. So here's where Perry and I intersected the most as brothers. Well, of course, growing up together, I would have stories. He was so big, I couldn't really get anywhere. If he decided what he was going to do to me, that was the end of it. He could pin me against the wall or the floor or whatever. Eventually, however, I found my own way of sort of competing with Perry. It had to do with words rather than muscles. But where we joined together in force, in league, was in collecting the memories of my father. So my writing the book, Tobias of the Amish, was very much born out of a conversation that I had with Perry and the family, and he was very enthused about this project. And so he was the most involved of members of our family, perhaps because he was the oldest. Well, Mary Edna was the oldest, and she did make a very strong contribution, but she died in 1995, and my project went on beyond that. So Perry and I would often have calls together. When he visited in Pennsylvania one occasion, he drew maps of the Kelowna area where they had lived, and we just had lots of times back and forth talking. He'd read the manuscript and so forth. So I want to give tribute to my brother Perry and his memory for helping to bring together that story, that family story. I'll share a few stories that I didn't share in the book. Will eventually be shared in another book, by the way, which is more about me. But I want to share one story now. This is probably my most painful memory with Perry. And it's one that took a while to forgive him for what happened. But I hope you'll enjoy it because, well, at least when I told it the other day, people were laughing most of the time, even though it was a story of my pain. So it actually took place just about 100 yards, well, 30 yards from where I'm standing at the moment, over here about where Joe Yoder is seated, actually, if you see him over there. So you can tell it was a worship service. And in this worship service, I'm the little boy who's wiggling. The way I describe it in my memoir is it's like having 2 arms and 2 legs for me is like holding 4 puppies all at once. And so sitting up front and trying to sit still was a major burden for me. And of course, the service goes long, and you find all kinds of ways as a little boy to pass the time. Well, you know how, maybe some of you do this. You squeeze your eyes shut, and you see colors when you squeeze your eyes and things. Squeeze them a little bit like this and push your hands against them, and you see more colors, and just everything you can think of. Count the tiles on the floor. And if you want more detail, you can talk to David Yoder about other things we did as a group to pass the time up front there. Yes. Well, I just will say one. This is a little parenthesis in my own story. I do remember Ernest Yoder. Ernest, you're here somewhere, right? Okay, he's over here. I do remember when we had a prayer meeting and we'd kneel for prayer, that was a time to count how many tiles you could touch during the prayer. So this is not to point at them. This is you have to physically touch each one to count toward the final count. And as I remember, Ernest was the prize winner, but the problem was the prayer ended a little bit unexpectedly, and he was way on the far end when this happened. And it created quite a scramble to get back to nobody could suspect what had happened besides the boys in the front row. So back to the front row. Well, I had in my pocket a little green man, a little plastic man that my brother had rescued in the trash route. And, well, you know, there are some churches where people bring toys to church every Sunday like that, not up front here at Center. So I had it there, and it was a sort of, well, this is interesting. So it kind of got passed down the row, and first thing you know, it ended up in the row in back of me. Well, I'm trying to get it back here, you know, and no, they held on to it, and so this is getting to be people kind of smirking and snickering a little bit about this. I'm not sure this happened in exact the same occasion, but in my memoir, I put it together in the same one because it fits there. I had suspenders at the time. Now, I don't know if any of you have worn these elastic suspenders that has a little clip on the front. You clip it like this, and it has an adjustment right here. Well, they were a little loose, I thought, so I'll adjust those a little bit tighter. By the time I adjust it, it flips off and whacks in the back of the pew in back of me. Okay, so I got to pull this thing back. Well, you can't pull it back when the boy in the next row is holding on to the end of it. So I finally got that back, and about that time, my ear goes like this. My brother Perry had been observing from a couple rows back. Sorry, Sheila. So that was from about the front row. He took me out the east aisle over there, and I'm going along like this, trying to touch base there. And I'm thinking, is anybody listening to the sermon right now? I'm sort of doubting it. So we came out here on the west side and out the door on the east side, and he was telling me I deserved a spanking, although I think he used the Pennsylvania Dutch way of saying, "Das macht schläg." This makes for a spanking. And here's where the most painful part comes in, because he was trying to be a dad to me. You know, I didn't have a dad, I'm not sure how it would have been, but I resented that. I resented Perry trying to be my dad. And that's how I sort of related to him about that. And anyhow, I got away, and he let me go and went back to the front there. And again, the boys are sort of smirking like, well, what do you expect to happen around here? So when you act this way. So there we were. I learned a little bit. It took a while to forgive Perry for that. But of course, I've forgiven him many times since for that. And I have a much deeper understanding of why he did it in the first place. Because, well, he cared about me and the reputation for our family. And so I treasure my brother Perry deeply. And the most painful part of his Parkinson's was just that he lost the ability to communicate by phone, because that's how I had to communicate with him. We have, in the last several years, we've cultivated weekly sibling conversations. So Perry is a part of it, my sister Irma. Glenn is a part of it. I'm pointing to Glenn. And of course, Perry, when he could be on the line. And he did really enjoy being on the line with us, just to listen if he couldn't express himself. Another painful thing to see his decline was when I'd say to him, "Perry, when did this happen?" We were talking about some history thing, and I just knew he'd know it, and he says, "I'm not sure." And I just knew this is Parkinson's advancing on him, because that's not the answer I was used to getting when we talk about when did something happen, especially things that stand out in memory. So I just want to give tribute to Perry for the loving care that he gave to so many people as a way of expressing, and I think a little bit like my mother, probably in gratitude for this community in sharing for our widowed family. And I want to express my gratitude even for today, for this event, and for the way that I see friends and fellow members of Perry put together an event and taking care of the details, all these details. I see love in every one of them. I see love in all those details, a way of bringing a community together to really care for a family, and especially for Judith. May the Lord bless you all. Now, if there's anyone else to share, we'll do that yet. I think we probably need to go soon, but I want to give opportunity for anyone else. Glenn wants to say one more thing here.
When Dad had his shop here where the greenhouse is, he just got these peanuts. They were metal cans, and the key was on the bottom. I don't know how many of you remember that. When the key was on the bottom, you know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wind
Well, you took the key off, and you put it in, and you rolled it around the top, and then that's how you got your peanuts.
Yes.
You know, it wasn't cardboard like it is now. Okay.
And it's the kind of thing that Perry would love to imitate, just how you do it, right? I want to mention one more thing as a mention of gratefulness. Back to this note that was handed to me about Perry wanting to make something right where there had been a debt, where Dad had a debt. I had a wonderful conversation with Harley Wagler shortly before he died. It had to do with stories that he told me about my father that I had never heard before and all the other work we had done. But here's one piece of it. Well, in the upcoming book, you can read the story of how his father once loaned money to my father against his wife's wishes. But also mentioned then how when after Dad passed and Mother moved to this community, how his father came to my mother, Emma, to specifically say that the debt was forgiven, that she should not think about it. And here's what else he said that I think you all need to hear. He said, the Center Community Church is a very forgiving and generous community. And I just want to say amen to that. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for participating, Irvin for leading out. It's been a very good time. That concludes anything formal that's planned. So you're free to go, whatever, or stay, keep visiting, reminiscing.